So in part 1, we discussed 4 astoundingly odd aspects of Qhorin Halfhand's mission into the Frostfangs. First, there was the fact that Qhorin was risking his quest by including a conspicuous direwolf and a green boy with no ranging experience. Second, there was the perplexing situation of Qhorin not torturing Ygritte when he had a professional torturer with him. In fact, as it turns out, Ygritte had valuable information on the Horn of Winter. Third, there was the incident of Qhorin rescuing Ghost and placing its life over the lives of actual human beings. And fourth, there was the action of Qhorin trying to hide and shake the Wildlings, a futile effort, when he could have tried to move quickly to outrun them. In the end, we had to accept that Qhorin is either an idiot, or this was all his intention. He wanted Jon to infiltrate the Wildlings from the beginning. Qhorin chose Jon because of his Wildling blood, something that would endear him to the Wildlings, and specifically to Mance Rayder. Qhorin fully expected Jon to capture a spearwife and spare her, thus marrying them and endearing Jon to her. And Qhorin was intentionally trying to be captured. However, the problem with the idea of this all being Qhorin's plan is that by letting Ygritte go, Qhorin shows that he doesn't really care about the Horn of Winter. So if not to find information on the Horn, what was the whole purpose of the quest into the Frostfangs? What's the point of having Jon infiltrate the Wildlings? Well, to get inside Qhorin's head, let's go back to when Qhorin first meets Gior at the Fist of the First Men. The two men have this exchange. "Rattleshirt, the Weeping Man, and every other great chief and small," he was saying. "They have wargs as well, and mammoths, and more strength than we would have dreamed." Or so he claimed. I will not swear the truth of it. Evan believes the man was telling us tales to make his life last a little longer. "True or false, the wall must be warned," the old bear said as Jon placed the platter between them. "And the king." "Which king?" "All of them, the true and false alike. If they would claim the realm, let them defend it." The half-hand helped himself to an egg and cracked it on the edge of the bowl. "These kings will do what they will," he said, peeling away the shell. "Likely it will be little enough. The best hope is Winterfell. The Starks must rally the north." Now we should pay attention to Correns' assessment here. He says the kings will do what they will. Qhorin seems to have a poor opinion of the current kings who are part of the War of the Five Kings, which would include Robb Stark. And yet he says the best hope is Winterfell. Winterfell? Who at Winterfell? Robb is in the south. Bran and Rickon? 2 small boys are the best hope? Qhorin also says that the Starks must rally the north. Except Robb already rallied the north and marched them south. Qhorin's assessment on first glance seems like gibberish. What on earth is he talking about? Small boys rallying an army that's already left? This interpretation doesn't seem likely. So let's look for another interpretation of the best hope is Winterfell, the Starks must rally the north. Qhorin is clearly not talking about Robb, as he's far away in the south, as are Sansa and Arya. Rickon is 4. This really leaves Bran, our Prince of Winterfell, a crippled 9-year-old boy. Him, and of course Jon Snow. Let's keep in mind that Qhorin was quite focused on Jon's Stark lineage. "The old gods are strong beyond the wall, the gods of the first men, and the Starks. Then you must do what needs to be done," Qhorin Halfhand said. "You are the Blood of Winterfell, and a man of the Night's Watch." Let's remember that Qhorin specifically said that he's bringing Jon on the quest because Jon is a Stark. Jon, who Qhorin says has the blood of Winterfell. And he believes the best hope is Winterfell, the Starks must rally the north. Now, admittedly, Jon himself seems to be under the impression that blood isn't that important to Wildlings. He claims that Mance's son is of no value in that heredity doesn't lead to kingship. He also believes that blood means little unless amongst the free folk, a lesson he learned from Ygritte. However, nearly every Wildling we meet seems to believe that heredity is in fact very important. Ygritte, for example, introduces Jon as the Bastard of Winterfell. She says he has Eddard Stark's blood, of Winterfell. Mance as well calls Jon the Bastard of Winterfell, and stresses that the blood of the first men flows in his veins, that of the Starks. Even Craster takes a look at Jon and instantly recognizes his lineage, that of a Stark. Perhaps the biggest indicator that lineage does in fact matter is that Garrick Kingsblood names himself Kingsblood and claims to be a direct descendant of Raymond Redbeard, an old king beyond the wall. Tormund disparages Garrick by claiming that he's only the descendant of Raymond's younger brother. Clearly lineage is important to Garrick and he thinks others will be impressed by it, and clearly Tormund thinks lineage is important enough to counter the claim. Keep in mind, the wildling Osha actually rejects Mance as king beyond the wall because of his lineage. Mance thinks he'll fight the brave, sweet, stubborn man like the White Walkers were no more than rangers. But what does he know? He can call himself king beyond the wall all he likes, but he's still just another old black crow who flew down from the Shadow Tower. He's never tasted winter. I was born up there, child, like my mother, and her mother before her, and her mother before her, born of the free folk. We remember. Now, blood is important not just because Jon has wildling blood, making him kin to the wildlings and a good mole, but it's also important because Jon doesn't just have wildling blood. He has wildling king's blood. Bael the Bard was king beyond the wall, which means Jon Snow is his direct descendant. And according to Ygritte, all of the wildlings know the story of Bael the Bard. And now we're getting hints at why Jon is so important. Jon isn't just a great mole, he's a potential leader of the wildlings, a potential king. Now much of Jon's journey into the Frostfangs stresses the fact that the wildlings and the Starks are one. Qhorin stresses this fact before they leave, Ygritte tells of the Rose of Winterfell, and Qhorin reaffirms the wildlings are not so different from those south of the wall. So now let's go back to Qhorin's statement. The best hope is Winterfell, the Starks must rally the north. I find it interesting that just one chapter after Qhorin says that the Starks must rally the north, Ygritte tells us that the true north is the north north of the wall. That everything south of the wall is the south. Could it be that when Qhorin said the Starks must rally the north, he was not talking about the north south of the wall, but the north north of the wall? Could it be that Qhorin was not talking about rallying the northern lords, but rallying instead the wildlings? After all, any army of a significant size south of the wall has marched off. At this point in our story, there's perhaps 7,000 or 8,000 northern soldiers left in the north, and they're filled with old men and green boys. The only sizable army left to rally is the one north of the wall. Now Qhorin gives a very interesting assessment of the wildlings to Jon when the two are discussing the Rose of Winterfell and the story of Mance. Only fools like Thorin Smallwood despise the wildlings. They are as brave as we are, Jon. As strong, as quick, as clever. But they have no discipline. They name themselves the Free Folk, and each one thinks himself as good as a king, and wiser than a maester. Brave, strong, quick, clever, lacking in discipline. Now, normally when one tells a story about how everyone is the same and how we should all get along, they mention universals like love, friends, and family. We sometimes hear of generosity, faith, the desire for a good job, freedom, safety, things like this. But Qhorin focuses on whether they're brave, strong, quick, clever, and their level of discipline. That doesn't seem like an assessment of people for coexistence. It sounds like an assessment of people for utilization. It sounds like Qhorin is talking about mobilizing them into an army. Keep in mind, Qhorin wouldn't be the only person to want to use Jon to rally the wildlings to fight. Stannis, after talking to Mance, specifically tried to marry Jon to Val to win wildling support. Without Jon, he then considers other Lords of Winterfell and eventually settles on a Karstark and talks about how Karstarks have Stark blood in them, the Blood of Winterfell. The Blood of Winterfell, of course, means the blood of Bael the Bard. Now you may wonder, if Qhorin means to use Jon to rally the wildlings, who is he rallying them against? Isn't the whole point of rallying the North to defend the realm from the wildlings? Well, let's go to Qhorin during a moment where he is perhaps the most honest, during the fire that he shares with Jon. The flames were burning low by then, the warmth fading. "The fires will soon go out," Qhorin said, "but if the wall should ever fall, all the fires will go out." Now, let's think about that for a moment. Let's say all 100,000 wildlings make it through the wall and start rampaging the south. Now sure, maybe the north might fall, but eventually the Vale Lords or the Reachers or the Dornish would cut them to pieces. There's no way that the wildlings are a threat to all of society. Not to mention, if the wildlings conquered everything, the world would simply be under wildling rule. That's hardly the end of everything. Wildlings build fires after all. Now unless Qhorin is being super melodramatic, it's pretty clear that Qhorin is talking about a doomsday situation. And a doomsday message is clearly not about the wildlings. It's clearly about the others. After all, Qhorin is talking about dying fires, and dying fires are repeatedly associated with the others. Sam is near a dying fire when the others come for him and Gilly. Varamir Sixskins has a dying fire when the others come for him, and Tormund talks about how the others were after his people, and some nights fires would just shrivel up and die. So when Qhorin is talking about all the fires going out, he's talking about the others overwhelming the world and killing all of humanity. And it's pretty hard for a reader to look over that line and not be at least reminded of the threat of the others. And this isn't the only line that shows that Qhorin is aware that the others are a threat. After Jon's wolf dream, Qhorin says, "The cold winds are rising. Mormont feared as much. Benjen Stark felt it as well. Dead men walk and trees have eyes again. Why should we balk at wargs and giants?" Now it's that first line that's interesting. The cold winds are rising. We have heard this line a few times before from various sources. Osha is actually our first character to say it. The cold winds are rising, and men go from their fires and never come back. Or if they do, they're not men no more, but only wights with blue eyes and cold black hands. So Osha pairs the line with the coming of the others. Mormont says something similar. It would seem there were only the two of those creatures, whatever they were. I will not call them men. And thank gods for that. Any more and, well, that doesn't bear thinking of. There will be more, though. I can feel it in these old bones of mine. And Maester Aemon agrees. The cold winds are rising, summer is at an end, and a winter is coming such as this world has never seen. Again, we have an association of this line with the others, and in this case a bad winter as well. Mormont, by the way, loves this line and says it 2 more times. Once to talk about animals coming south, missing rangers, and Mance's gathering, and once more to warn Craster that bad times are coming. In addition to Osha, Mormont, and Qhorin, Alliser Thorne also says the line "the cold winds are rising" when he travels to King's Landing with a White's Hand to ask for more men. So it's rather clear that by saying the cold winds are rising, Qhorin is talking about the return of the others. However, what is exceptionally odd about this line is that Qhorin associates the return of the others with other events. Namely, he associates it with the trees having eyes again. And he doesn't just do this one time, but twice. The second time being when Qhorin sends Ebben off. Tell Mormont what Jon saw, and how. Tell him that the old powers are waking, that he faces giants and wargs, and worse. Tell him that the trees have eyes again. Now it's worth noting that there was no event on the quest into the Frostfangs that hinted that the others have returned. Ghosts saw a werewood, a warg, and some giants, but there was no sign of wights or White Walkers. So it's interesting that Qhorin is so confident about their return. Keep in mind, this is only something Mormont suspects, and he's seen the dead rise. So either Jon's wolf dream clued Qhorin in for some unknown reason, or Qhorin was already confident about the others' return before they left. Now there is that former possibility, that Qhorin associates the dream of a werewood with the return of the others. But Qhorin seems to have very positive feelings about the old gods. He claims he brings Jon because of his connection to the old gods, and he seems rather content with Ghost being on the quest. He asks about the wolf a couple times before they leave, and later puts the pet's life above human beings. If Qhorin thought the old gods were a threat, I imagine he would have ditched Ghost or not brought him along in the first place. What's also rather suspicious regarding Qhorin and his connection to the old gods is that he orders Jon to go to sleep right before Jon has his wolf dream. It was almost as if Qhorin knew what was coming, as if he was working for the old gods. Qhorin perhaps associates the trees with the coming of the others because he's been receiving warnings as well. And so now we have a couple of conspiracies on our hands. Our first series explored how the old gods rigged Jon's election as Lord Commander. And here we have a scheme to integrate Jon in with the Wildlings and endear them to him, perhaps even to make Jon their leader. Put together, this looks like a plan to get someone sympathetic with the Wildlings elected as Lord Commander. A plan to save the Wildlings, bring them through the wall, and mobilize them as an army. This is actually what Jon attempts to do in A Dance with Dragons. However, a benevolent force helping our protagonist in his struggle against evil is a little too cliché for our author. And I should say, there is another piece to this puzzle that flips everything on its head. And this subject is a doozy. Next time we will talk about the secrets of Craster's Keep. Once again, I'm probably wrong about half of this. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.